There is a text in your drafts that has been sitting there for 3 days. You know exactly which one. And the person you wrote it to has no idea it exists. You wrote it once, read it back, deleted half of it, rewrote it, added an emoji, then removed the emoji because suddenly you didn't know who you even were anymore. You showed it to no one, decided it was fine, hovered over send for a full 4 seconds, and closed the app. Said nothing. And the thing you actually needed to say is still somewhere inside you. Getting heavier every hour you don't send it. Society would tell you that you're overthinking, that you need to just press send, that it's not that deep. But psychology looks at what's actually happening and says something completely different. This is not a texting problem. This is not a confidence problem. And it is absolutely not a sign that you have nothing to say. What's happening inside your brain when you rewrite and delete and rewrite again is one of the most psychologically complex behaviors in modern human communication. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly where it comes from, what it has been protecting you from, and why the most important text you'll ever send is the one you keep deleting. We are going to perform a full autopsy on the unsent message. You know exactly how it starts. Someone asks you something simple, or maybe they don't even ask. Maybe something just happens and you want to respond. A friend posts something that clearly means they're struggling. A person you like hasn't texted back in 3 days and you want to say something casual, but not too casual. A colleague said something that bothered you and you just want to briefly mention it. You open the app, start typing, and then the negotiation begins. Too direct. Delete. Too passive. Delete. Too much punctuation. They'll think you're upset. Too little. They'll think you're unbothered when you're not. You restructure the whole sentence. Add a word, remove a word. Consider their possible reaction to version 1. Then, version 2. Then you start imagining what they'll think about the fact that you're even bringing this up at all. 40 minutes later, nothing sent. A productivity coach would tell you to just push through it. But psychology says this is not a communication problem. This is a protection problem. In 1974, social psychologist Mark Snyder introduced a concept called self-monitoring, the degree to which a person regulates how they present themselves based on how they believe they'll be perceived. High self-monitors don't just ask, "What do I want to say?" They ask, "How will this land? Will I seem needy? Will I seem cold? Will this make me look like someone who has it together or someone who is barely holding on?" High self-monitors rewrite over and over because to them the message is never just information. The message is evidence. Evidence of who they are, what they feel, what they need, and whether those things are acceptable to another person. But here's where it gets much deeper. Self-monitoring exists on a spectrum. Some people naturally monitor more than others, but research consistently shows that extreme self-monitoring, the kind that ends in paralysis, in unsent messages, in swallowed words, is almost always connected to one specific kind of early learning. At some point in your life, your words were used against you. Maybe it was subtle. You said how you felt and someone minimized it. You expressed a need and were told you were too sensitive. You asked a question and were made to feel foolish for not already knowing the answer. Or maybe it was less subtle than that. Maybe honesty had real consequences in your house. Maybe saying the wrong thing at the wrong moment, in the wrong tone, created an entire situation that you then had to manage alone. Your brain learned something very specific. Words are not neutral. Words are leverage. Words can be turned around. And the safest way to protect yourself from the consequences of your own expression is to never fully commit to it. The unsent text is not a failure. It is a highly sophisticated act of self-preservation. Your brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do. Evaluate every possible interpretation, anticipate every possible reaction, and only release words into the world when they are guaranteed to be safe. The problem is that guarantee never comes, so neither do the words. There's something about text specifically that makes this pattern worse, and it's not obvious until you think about it. When you speak out loud, you cannot unsay it. The moment the words leave your mouth, they exist. There is no draft, no delete button. Spoken communication has a kind of forced commitment that actually bypasses the self-monitoring loop, at least partially. But text gives you infinite control. And for a brain trained to be afraid of its own expression, infinite control becomes infinite delay. You can rewrite forever. You can stay in the draft. The message lives in a perfect purgatory. It exists for you, but not for them. You have technically reached out, but technically taken no risk. It is the psychological equivalent of standing at a door with your hand raised, never knocking. And the longer you stay there, the heavier the unsent message becomes. Because now you're not just trying to say the original thing. You're managing guilt about not saying it sooner. You're wondering if the moment has passed. You're worried that bringing it up now will seem strange. The window closes, and you close with it. Here is what makes this pattern so quietly devastating. The reason you rewrite 11 times is because you desperately want to be understood. You want to find exactly the right words so that when they land, the other person gets it, gets you, without any room for misinterpretation. Every rewrite is an attempt to build a bridge that cannot be misread. But the bridge you build by sending nothing is a wall. The people in your life experience you as someone who holds back, someone unreachable. Not because you have nothing to say, you have everything to say, but because the words never arrive. And what they fill that silence with is their own interpretation. And their interpretation will almost never match what you were actually trying to express. You protect yourself from being misunderstood, and you end up more misunderstood than anyone in the room. So how do you move through this? Not by just pressing send. That advice ignores everything we just covered and treats a nervous system response like a logistical inconvenience. The real shift begins when you change the question. Most chronic non-senders ask, is this message perfect enough to be safe? That question has no satisfying answer, which is exactly why the rewriting never stops. The question that actually leads somewhere is, what is the cost of saying nothing? Not the theoretical cost, the real one. The friendship that quietly faded because you never said the thing. The need that went unmet because you couldn't find the right words for it. The version of yourself that stayed invisible because saying the wrong thing felt more dangerous than staying unseen. When you start counting the cost of silence alongside the cost of imperfect words, the calculation shifts. There is also a practice psychologists call good enough communication. The idea that a message doesn't need to be perfect to be worth sending. That a slightly raw, slightly direct, slightly vulnerable text that arrives is worth infinitely more than a perfectly crafted one that never does. Send the second draft, not the 11th. The second one, the one that's a little honest, a little unguarded, a little more like you than feels comfortable. That is the one that sounds like you. And the people worth reaching will recognize it. If you've spent years rewriting and not sending, you are not broken and you are not bad at communicating. You are someone whose words have always carried enormous weight. Someone who learned early that language is not free. That expression has consequences. That being understood is not guaranteed. Your caution is intelligent. Your instinct to protect yourself makes complete sense given what taught it to you. But you are older now than the moment that created this pattern. And the words you've been holding, the ones in the drafts, the ones you delete at the last second, the ones that live only in your chest and never make it to the air, they deserve to exist. Not because they're perfect, because they're yours. Tell me, Is there a text in your drafts right now that you know you should send? And if you want to understand why your brain holds onto the things you never got to say far longer than it should, the next video goes exactly there. Welcome to Being Shared. You are not broken. You are human.